Hey everyone, Blankenship here. Stupid intro. Um, a lot of people ask me what my favorite films are, or what I consider to be the best films, and that's a fairly loaded question that one can't probably answer unless you set up some credentials and define the terms upon which the list is going to be based. Um, I mean, are we talking about American films? Are we talking about when people say terms like of all time, you kind of cringe because it's. I mean, film has been around since the early 1900s, as pretty much as we know it today. I mean, that's a lot of time to consider, and not to mention that a lot of films, tons of films, hundreds are made every year. Some that aren't even seen. Some, I mean, so what we're gonna do is I'm going to list 10 titles, and before doing that, I'm going to set up the parameters upon which I base this list. Um, Now, we're going to start off. This is a matter of opinion. Let's just clear the air on that right now. I don't believe in using the term best film ever made because I no one can answer that. Um, I mean, I guess if you want to keep up appearances and use AFI's list, or if you want to go into that, that's fine. But it's really debatable once you start using best. So this for me is a list of 10 favorite films. This list is based on personal aesthetic, um, from a number of points of view, as an observer, someone who watches, um, also as someone who creates material. Um, some of these are very big influences, and the one thing is that a lot of them are going to really just span, not a lot of them, all of them, are only going to span kind of a window of time. I hate when people say, again, like greatest films of all time, and yet the films are not any older than 30. Um, all of these films fit with it. I mean, I don't. Let me see, because I've got all the titles right here, and none of them exceed beyond early 70s. Um, I'm already trying to rectify that by watching more films, and specifically older films. Today's my day off. I was actually planning to watch a few today. Um, and, a big thanks to my uncle John and my mother and my family. Um, they play kind of a pivotal role in trying to extend my cinematic vocabulary. But having said all that, I think these are 10 very strong titles. They're very well put together films. They're the films that, for me, I can watch over and over again. Maybe not all at once. I can't watch it like that. But I certainly find myself coming back to these titles an awful lot. And I'm only boiling it down to 10. There will be some honorable mentions at the end because there are some titles that I've left off that, I mean, could definitely be in there. And really, it's all an aesthetical choice, and it's a matter of what mood you're in, because any of these could be interchangeable with other tremendous films. But for me, as a 23-year-old in 2012, right now, how my mind operates, these 10 do it for me. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And if my eyes dart, I'm looking at the other titles, or I'm watching Doctor Who, because that's on right now. The Christopher Eccleston, if you're watching, Adam. Okay, number 10, Memento. Uh, Terrific film by Christopher Nolan. And I know that maybe some of his earlier work tends to get overshadowed by his work in the Batman films, or Inception. I had actually seen Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, The Prestige, and Inception before seeing Memento. Kind of sad about that, but I'm glad that I have watched it now because it's tremendous. I love how it breaks traditional structure form by going backwards. Uh, and another disclaimer. I'm going to see if I can alleviate spoilers as much as possible. So I won't talk about things that will spoil it, but that idea that Chris had to, and his brother, because his brother wrote the short story that it's based on, uh, to tell the film from the end to the beginning. It really is quite brilliant. Um, and it's a lot more ballsier than, I mean, because I know Tarantino plays with time and narrative structure like that, but Memento does just such a tremendous job. Guy Pearce gives a terrifically isolated performance with his condition. The lighting is just terrific. Um, yes, Wally Feister, who's been Nolan's collaborator for cinematography throughout all of his films, as I understand it. Carrie Ann Moss does a terrific job as well. Just, you know, I can relate to uh, Leonard's dilemma, not in non-medical terms, but you know, also when he discusses in the flashbacks Sammy Jenkins and that whole idea of, you know, like when Sammy's wife is, you know, talking, you know, admits to like leaving him out on, you know, out in the street just to see if he'll come back home. I mean, just things like that where you can just feel like the frustration of wanting to break through that wall, but it's just not there. And that, you know, I fit into that for a lot of other things socially, and some of them fell, but that's okay. But yeah, number 10, Memento. Tremendous film. I highly recommend it. Number 9, gonna go a little bit bigger in terms of scope. Raiders of the Lost Ark, directed by Steven Spielberg in 1981, and starring Harrison Ford as the iconic character, more so than Han Solo, in my opinion. Um, I know a lot of people, well, I know some people that have kind of started to diminish the impact of Raiders. Same thing with Tim Burton's Batman, and neither of which I agree with. I think the impact is very clear and has been there all along. Uh, Indiana Jones is obviously, as we all know, a throwback to old adventure serials from the 1930s, pulp magazines at that point. And it's just tremendously well done and well crafted. The thing that I really love about Raiders, probably more than that aesthetical homage to serials, I really like the score. And I mean that's really easy to say because it's John Williams, and you know anybody who knows contemporary film knows that John Williams is the man um, when it comes to what he does. But there, I mean, the Raider score is really evocative. You know, it just triggers something in you. That theme, even if you're not that big in Indiana Jones, um, when you listen to that theme, I mean, it kind of just propels you. And I like that kind of music. I mean, it doesn't have to fall back on lyrics. It doesn't have an intent or an agenda like that. It's just propelling action. I mean, it propels Indy throughout the entire film. One of my favorite sequences from the film is, of course, the desert chase. The Indy on horseback chasing after Belloc and toting the Nazis to retrieve the Ark. It's a wonderfully dynamic action sequence, very well put together, and I think it holds up tremendously. Um, you know, other performances in the film, certainly Paul Freeman. Um, Probably yeah, I would say he's my favorite villain in the series. Molaram is a close second. Um, but it's just very very fun to watch too. Um, So yeah, 9, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Go watch it. Number 8, going into the future a little bit for this one, RoboCop. I know it says trilogy, but we're just talking about the first film, directed by Paul Verhoeven in 1987. A very well-received, slightly controversial Dutch filmmaker early on. He made a lot of films like Turkish Delight and Spetters, Soldier of Orange, um, and this was really his first American film, and I just love it so much because not only does it take the paradigm of the superhero, which RoboCop really is treated like in the film, and a lot more in the sequels that were written by Frank Miller, um, but it really kind of turns it on its head with this absurd comic book violence, and more than that, Verhoeven's knack for American satire. It's so funny, and what makes it so funny to me is because all of that stuff is true. I mean, you've got the scene where it's a commercial, and the family is talking about nuclear war, and you know, Pakistan's threatening my border, and so like, and it's revealed that of course they're playing Nukem, which is a board game like Battleship, but it's dealing with nuclear war in the mid to late 80s. I mean, it's just that is absolutely hilarious. Um, but more than that, again, like several of the protagonists in the film, to me, or not protagonists, this protagonists in these films that I'm listing. RoboCop is a very isolated figure. But the fact that he comes in at the end of the movie and stands up for what's right to him, and he stands up in a wonderful flourish against his own creators. Um, that's, I mean, just absolutely. I mean, it's enthralling, and I mean, just design-wise, RoboCop is just so well put together with its shot composition and particularly with its editing. I really love the way that it's edited together, and I love the way that the story is structured. Um, RoboCop's design by Rob Bottin, who went on to work on with Paul again on Total Recall, also did the prosthetic work for Fight Club. Um, just made a magnificent design. RoboCop is very, I mean, look at him. That's a killer design, I have to say. It's very striking. It's very hard not to just be entranced by when you see it, and especially in the in the films when you see it in motion, when you see Peter Weller's movements that he worked on with his trainer Moni Akeem, and I mean it's just absolutely terrific. Um, and the comments that the film makes about our culture, obsessed with violence, obsessed with vanity. I mean, you look at it, and of course, it's a product of the '80s Reaganomics. Um, but actually, if you were to watch it today, it is even more so now. Because of just our, in my opinion, kind of crippling addiction to capitalism and getting ahead, things like that. But the and it's also kind of a nice touch that the most human character in the movie is RoboCop, is a cyborg, is a robot, and just that fight for his humanity is something that I can identify with a lot. So RoboCop, number 8. Number 7, quite the acid trip, but from one of my favorite filmmakers. We have Videodrome, directed by David Cronenberg in 1983. Film is just a lovely, seedy, underbelly piece of brilliance. I love it a lot. It tells the story of Max Wren, who is the president of Channel 83. It's not specified that it's Toronto. I don't think, but I mean, it's shot in Toronto, David Cronenberg's home in Canada. Um, I just love that idea of, and this actually ties into when I worked at You Edit Video. And even when I worked at the equipment cage at the Art Institute, and the Art Institute is where I was when I first discovered the film. Um, I just love the atmosphere of Videodrome, the textual quality of it. I mean, it's so. I don't know if this is a weird way to describe a film, but like you can feel it. Like I'm feeling. It's so tangible to me, and it's so detailed. Um, I mean, I love the way that Channel 83 looks when Max is walking through. Um, and then another reason that I really like it, beyond the science fiction, is the element of um, what Cronenberg wanted to talk about as far as Marshall McLuhan's quote, um, where he said that the medium is the message. A lot of themes from Videodrome and from other films tie into Augment a lot, as far as the idea of technology and the human body becoming one. Um, I also really like the performances. James Woods is terrific to watch, and also Debbie Harry is absolutely tremendous. I mean, a little bit more understated from her stage persona as Blondie. Um, she's also very beautiful and very well lit. Who did the cinematography again? Sorry, I don't know if you could tell by now, but I'm doing this on the fly, so I don't have anything prepared. Cinematography. Can you show me? No, you won't show me. That's fine. But anyway, really love the lighting of Videodrome, especially in Max's apartment, and the production design. Oh my god. I mean, I already just mentioned Channel 83. Max's apartment is awesome. Um, and I mean, it's so awesome because it's so kind of bizarre and off kilter. Another thing, as far as texture is concerned, if you watch the movie or if you've seen the movie, the beginning of during the main titles, and this goes to sound design, when Max is looking over the stills for Samurai Dreams, the soft porn film that is trying to be pitched to him. He's looking over the glossy 8x10s, and when he's eating like pizza crust while he does this, and just like the sound of him eating the pizza crust and getting the sauce on his fingers, it's like, oh my god, it's just beautiful to me. And I know that sounds so bizarre, but it is. It's just such an attention to just the grit and just how it feels to be in this world that is about to be turned on its head, of course, by Videodrome carrier signal virus and Max's descent into either madness or another dimension, another species. Take from it what you will. But Videodrome is absolutely terrific. Moving on to number 6. The Clockwork Orange, directed by Stanley Kubrick, 1971. This is my Uncle John's favorite film, and I mean, I can clearly see that because it's just a tremendous piece. Stanley Kubrick is my favorite American filmmaker. Um, you know, posthumous, not dead, alive, it doesn't matter. Kubrick is, I mean, genius is really kind of an underrating term. And I don't say that in, as far as, ooh, I'm a Kubrick fanboy and I just got, oh my god, it's Stanley Kubrick. Because, I mean, try to be level-headed. But the notions that he has in all of his films, are absolutely staggering to consider and to watch. And and he's he's he does something in his films that me today, right now, I would love to see in more films, which is to kind of tap into ambiguity. So often I'm really tired of people that really just kind of spell out what their movie or what their story is about, and even worse, they're doing it like with the synopsis. The synopsis that you're going to read online before you even watch the thing? Are you kidding me? But he leaves it a lot more open ended than a lot of filmmakers today, and I like that and I applaud that. Clockwork Orange is, of course, the story of Alex Delars, played by Malcolm McDowell. Malcolm says this himself, that it was a role that he was born to play. I mean, you watch the movie, that's completely agreeable. Completely. There is no. I mean, I don't. And it's been so long anyway that. I mean, well, number one, nobody's going to remake a Kubrick film. I don't think. Somebody should. Who's going to be that stupid? But I mean, if Warner Brothers or somebody even considered trying to do a Clockwork Orange again, I mean, it's already dead in the water because you won't have Malcolm McDowell. Sorry, and you won't have Stanley either, unfortunately. Um, but it's again, like RoboCop, like Indiana Jones, like Max Wren. Alex is a very interesting character to watch, and you'll see. I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, you'll see a pattern in all of these movies combined, where the main character is really the focus, and is really the most interesting character in the movie. Um, that's why I didn't really put any of the Batman films, because as much as I love Batman, if I'm being honest, the villains kind of tend to take center stage for the most part. I'm really hoping that changes with Rises a little bit, hopefully. Except Batman Begins. And Andrew, if you're watching, I'll give you that. Batman Begins, he did good. But anyway, A Clockwork Orange is also, I mean, it's called science fiction, and it has I mean, the time isn't really specified. I mean, it looks like it's the future in Britain, um, but it's not really specified what time it is, and it's kind of left timeless as a result. So it's called futuristic, but it's more just itself. It's self-contained. It doesn't feel like any time period I had seen prior to seeing the movie. Um, but the main narrative, the idea of government sponsored psychiatric treatment um, being used on juvenile delinquents or criminals, and the pros and cons of that. The idea of these social authorities, you know, playing God with human beings like that. I mean, but when you put that when you set a fuse like Alex on that path of being conditioned like that, I mean, you're just gonna. I mean, as we get down, I'm gonna try and actually talk about the film's less and less, because it's more like I'm telling you the film, you need to go see it, because that's where we're at now. Um, Use of music, I mean, and color. Stanley really epitomizes the use of music and color and lighting and shot composition. I mean, to me, Kubrick is the one that his work really, when I first saw it, endowed me with the concept more than any other filmmaker of treating the frame as the canvas. Of course, a lot of films outside of Stanley does that, but they don't do it like he does. I mean, and it really comes from his background as a still photographer for Look magazine, and it's just tremendous. I think as far as his body of work goes, A Clockwork Orange is his best even more than 2001, is probably his best use of music. Um, where Beethoven, of course, plays a big part in the movie. Um, I mean, right off the top of my head, that scene when Alex and his droogs are walking down, um, you know, near the water, and he talks about hearing the Ludwig band playing from the window, and he puts his gang in their place. I mean, that's just beautiful photography, beautiful lighting. I mean, oh, and of course, I think the part of the film that most people remember, or I mean, off the top of their head, even I don't know, because it's a toss up. The when they first attack home, and Alex sings "Singing in the Rain." I mean, that's hard to beat. But I also really like his actual conditioning and the treatment when you know you know what I'm talking about, and just that moment when it's working. Fortunately for the bureaucrats, but unfortunately for Alex, the treatment is working as he's watching the the viddies, and he's just screaming off the top of his head, and he's oh, like that's just beautiful. And Malcolm plays just as much of a role in that as Stanley does. Together, the two of them are just really at their best in that movie, and just working together. It's tremendous. So, Clockwork Orange. Now, what was that? Six? Six? Yeah, six is good. Okay, number five. Probably one of the most technically majestic, very well put together, even with its production problems. Blade Runner, directed by Ridley Scott in 1982, starring Harrison Ford, Sean Young, Rutger Hauer, Joe Turkel, who was also in The Shining, another Kubrick movie. So I mean, I love that. I love when actors and filmmakers weave the tapestry like that. Blade Runner it has been quoted as the first science fiction art film, and very much like Kubrick and his attention to detail and visual, Ridley Scott also treats the frame very much like a canvas. Now, it was a real toss-up because again, like I said, this list is based just on mood and aesthetic and how I'm feeling in the moment right now. Um, I mean, it's Blade Runner or Alien as far as Ridley Scott. You could go with either one, and I would absolutely be like, that's fine, great. But Blade Runner, for me right now, kind of tops Alien because of really two reasons. Number one are the notions that it does in the story. The idea of humanity really not just being a human construct, and the idea of a replicant being able to maybe not embrace pure humanity, but humanity, in as it makes it that a replicant could make its own humanity. That's very beautiful, a very great idea. The second reason is when you watch Dangerous Days, the making of Blade Runner, and you just realize the absolute anguish that production took. To me, Blade Runner and Alien 3 are like sound like the hardest productions I've ever heard of. And just, what those productions had to go through and the end result and all of that. Blade Runner is absolutely beautiful. And of course, what takes center stage even more than the story, even more than the characters, although it's great, are the visuals. Lawrence Paul, production design. I mean, oh my God! If you watch that movie, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. the Hades landscape, the main drag of street that they built up at Pinewood Studios. I mean, there's really no words. It's absolutely beautiful. Cathode lighting and the colors and a lot like Videodrome, the texture of the street and the detail. The detail. Oh my! I mean, this is probably one of the most detailed films, um, detailed American films you've ever seen. Um, this to me is a lot like what eventually became Akira, Katsuhiro Otomo's tremendous manga and anime film in Japan. Both films feel a lot like this, feel the same to me because Blade Runner paints this very broad, very big vision of the future in 2019. And again, that's scary too. That year's not that far off. But that operating within that this ominous world is this absolutely beautiful primal story about what can make a living construct human, and don't replicants have the right to live? Don't they have the right to feel? um Harrison Ford gives a very understated performance as Deckard, isolated just as the other protagonists in these films that I've mentioned. um I mean, the admittedly, even they know that the chemistry between him and Sean Young doesn't work. Um, and it kind of works enough. Um, and then, of course, the other incredible performance, Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty, Tears and Rain. Say no more. You need to go and watch it right now if you haven't. If you have watched it, maybe it's time to watch again. Blade Runner. Number 4, the ultimate, in my opinion, um, cop drama, police procedural. Seven, directed by David Fincher, in 1995. Seven is great because, in Fincher's own words, it starts off in one place and ends somewhere else. It starts off, in a buddy cop lawn or going through the motions kind of way, and it ends up just becoming this beautiful morality play. I mean, the themes and the ideas, particularly, also in Blade Runner, really in all of these movies, are, I mean, to try and go into them here would just absolutely underrate them. So, I mean, again, I advise very strongly to watch all of these films. In my opinion, Seven is David Fincher's best. A lot of people might not agree with that. A lot of people might point and say Fight Club. Yeah, I mean, that's your opinion, and Fight Club is a great movie. I won't hold it against you, but Seven to me is just so tight. In a way, it's kind of funny because Fight Club might be to Blade Runner what Seven is to Alien, whereas one is really kind of big and broad and a little more ambiguous, and there's a lot more room for speculation, whereas the other is like tight and condensed and very streamlined and refined. I mean, because like Seven is one of those films that has like a very a big hook of a plot. Serial killer killing with the motivation of the seven deadly sins. I mean, that draws you in instantly. The other thing that I really like about Seven is that, now I don't like the term realistic. When people use that to describe films, I kind of just cringe because let's not go there. I don't like that idea. But I would say that how Fincher and Andrew Kevin Walker, the writer, uh, painted this portrait of being an inner city police officer or detective. It's very uncompromising. Very uncompromising. They talk in the behind the scene, or in the Fincher talks about in the commentary how In subsequent drafts, he didn't want it to be a thing where Brad Pitt's flashing lights in his car, driving through the city trying to save Gwyneth Paltrow, while John Doe tries to get to her. It easily could have become that. But of course, the film is most known for its ending. Again, not trying to spoil it, but it's just, ugh, it's so heart wrenching. I'm sure a lot of the people that are going to watch this video know Seven and have seen Seven. So, we're all sharing that feeling right now when you consider that ending. It's just, it really kind of hits you whenever you are watching the movie. The lighting of Seven, again, like Blade Runner and like Videodrome, Seven to me is a very textured film. The rain, the slick streets, the lighting in the morgue when they're looking at the gluttony victim, the lighting in the library sequence when Somerset is compiling his information to give to Mills. It's just, I think I would have to say that is just Fincher at his best. I've seen subsequent films, Social Network, just saw The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. They're great, in a way, but Seven is just like right up there. Seven is easily, for me, David Fincher's kind of masterpiece. And what's funny about it is then the commentary, he's like, to get the actors on board, like Kevin Spacey and stuff. He's like, look, this is not a film we're going to be remembered for. And I'm thinking, are you kidding? This is if there was any one film that you should be remembered for, David, it's this one, in my opinion. It's absolutely beautiful. So, Seven, go watch it. Also, who doesn't love just before I get to the next movie, those opening titles in Seven, awesome, just so awesome. Okay, number 3, in my opinion, and also Quentin Tarantino's, one of the best, if not the best, character studies ever put to film. Taxi Driver, directed by Martin Scorsese, 1976 or 4. I think it's 76. Yes, I'm right. 76. Starring Robert De Niro, Harvey Keitel, Albert Brooks, Sybil Shepherd, Peter Boyle, Jodie Foster. That's the sign of a good film, is when you can just rattle off the cast from memory. Oh my God. I have to admit, I hadn't seen this film until my birthday last year. 2011 is when I saw this picture for the first time, in April. And it's the one film to me that it took that long to see it. I've seen it now, and I feel like I feel like I've seen it. I've been watching it all my life, because I've watched it so much since then. Because it is absolutely so well put together, and really the epitome of all of these films. Videodrome, Seven, Blade Runner, Taxi Driver once again falls into the idea of a textured film, and for me, Taxi Driver is that idea at its zenith. Taxi Driver, oh my God, you just feel it so much, like the grit of the streets that Travis Bickle drives through. The lighting is just absolutely beautiful in the ugliest way possible. Translate that however you want. I just think it's gorgeous. Paul Schrader's writing, as a writer, and I've actually, because I got so interested in Taxi Driver that I went and found his script and actually read the script. I've done that. Taxi Driver is one of those films, a lot like Blade Runner and Kubrick's work, that I study. Either I'll put it in and I'll watch it, or I will just study the cut, study the composition. for me, just as much as Seven is Fincher at the top of his game, to me, Taxi Driver is Marty at the top of his game. I think a lot of people would agree, but again, it's it's one of those toss-ups. You want to tell me that Goodfellas or Mean Streets, Gangs of New York, fine. I mean, Marty's career kind of transcends where it's kind of arguable, but you'd be better off just not arguing and just saying that. Which I mean, all of his films are great. So just in my opinion, Taxi Driver is the cream and the crop. Um, Travis Bickle is incredibly fascinating to me. Um, I don't know if that plays. I don't know if it plays into me being in my early 20s and kind of getting into more of, or becoming more of an adult, um, but I mean, the whole film is about Travis's loneliness, God's lonely man, of course, and I mean, everybody on the planet Earth that is capable of watching this movie should identify with that. We have all been lonely before. I don't believe you if you say that you haven't felt lonely. I feel lonely a lot. So I absolutely sympathize, relate, love, embrace what the film is saying about that. Although, of course, it goes into the extremity of, you know, that isolation and the enclosure of his apartment or the enclosure of the taxi cab inflicts on him, funneling his vision into the violence that he sees in the streets of New York, to such extremity that he goes insane, or not insane, that he basically just loses it. I think I've got a better grasp on reality and humanity that I don't have to worry about that. But, it's just, Taxi Driver is what it is. It's breathtaking. It's urban, epic scope. But what's great about it is that it's the scope of one man's mind and his perceptions of the world around him. The score by Bernard Herrmann, absolutely tremendous. The theme with its saxophone, I mean, that hits you early on. I also just really love the uncompromise of the film, and just how hard it is. Very kind of unblinking look at violence, where it's not elliptical, where the notions that we're talking about are not sugar-coated. I mean, and it's I don't know, it's just hard to describe because, I mean, we've got that scene early on where Travis goes to the porn theater and is watching porn, and of course, to abstain from an X rating, I imagine, that they take the actual porn being shown on the screen, and I guess, like, they rubbed Vaseline or petroleum, something to fuzz it, or did something, camera, what have you, to fuzz it out so that you can't see. But it's just like, just the just the isolation of it, and just the kind of just the gristle, and I mean, it's just, I mean, you can go on and on about it, and of course, who doesn't love the finale when he tries to rescue Iris from sports brothel. It's just incredibly beautiful filmmaking, and I highly recommend it. Taxi Driver will be among my favorites for the rest of my life. So, number 2, we are running a little long here, but bear with me, we're almost done. Full Metal Jacket. Another Stanley Kubrick film, this one from 1987, starring Matthew Modine, Vincent D'Onofrio, Lee Ermey, Adam Baldwin. Kubrick's filmography, I could have made the list entirely of Kubrick films, because again, favorite filmmaker. All of his films are tremendous in a plethora of different ways. Um, but and again, I mean, it's a mood thing. It's a choice. At this time, Full Metal Jacket is the king for me. Although it could turn, it could become A Clockwork Orange, or it could become The Shining, or become Lolita or Paths of Glory. You know, it's just depending on what mood you're in. What Kubrick sets the mood. Which one do you want to invest in? Um, Full Metal Jacket is very relatable to me because I first discovered the film at the time when, at a time and at an age when I could have started enlisting for the armed forces. I don't hold anything against my friends that have, from high school or from whatever, that have enlisted. You men and women are far more courageous than I. I admit to that. Um, but I mean, the film really kind of made an impression on me as far as that it takes a lot to do that. But more than that, I mean, because you are you people that have enlisted, you are being asked to go and be prepared to die, and be prepared to take a life. And I mean, you know, whether you agree or disagree, this is just my opinion. Like this list, that you have to lose some of your humanity and some of your soul to be able to stomach doing that. To be able to, I mean, you know, at the end of the film when Joker um, and all of the rest of them are looking at this young Viet Cong girl that has been plaguing them in the city of Hue during the third act, single-handedly. I mean, these are armed men. You've got Joker and Cowboy and Animal Mother, and they are all bested by this little Vietnamese girl until, of course, they get the drop on her. She's shot. She's not going to make it. The idea that he can just pull his sidearm and shoot her dead right there in front of him, which parallels what happens to Pyle at the end of the first act of the movie. I mean, the fact that you can be so desensitized like that you can do that is absolutely frightening to me. The process that goes from turning boys and girls, and I mean really at the time boys, but to turn people and to kind of devolve them. It has to be done. You can't argue. I don't think that you can argue that. You have to be dehumanized in order to look through a sniper scope, or to look at somebody, see the life in their eyes as you take that life away from them, whether for political reasons or combat. I mean, I can kind of, I mean, even if it's for your own survival, still that takes a lot. And just again, Kubrick's uncompromising ability to portray that process of turning people into killers, which is kind of the basis of the entire film. I mean, it's absolutely tragic to me. It's most tragic when personified by uh, Private Pyle, and just I mean, that's absolutely heartbreaking in that first act, which is such a juxtaposition, of course, and I have to comment on him, to Lee Ermey as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Oh my God, I wish. I mean, there's no way that he could live throughout the movie, but wow, I mean, he is absolutely memorable. So memorable that, of course, he becomes the general in Toy Story. But um, he is. Your eye is on him that entire first act. It's just terrific. Um, Also, Stanley's use of Lighting in this one is also tremendous. The nighttime scenes um, at the base and the opening when everybody attacks Pyle with the soap. That lighting is absolutely beautiful, and the lighting in the head at the end when he goes Vincent's swan song at the end of the first act is absolutely beautiful. I love it. It's what else can I say? Music cues. The music for when Pyle does his does his bit in the bathroom with Joker and Hartman. I mean, and that comes back at the end of the movie with Joker once he's made the kill and everybody's like fucking hardcore. That music cue, and you know what I'm talking about, is amazing, amazing. Full Metal Jacket. Go watch it right now, right now. But the moment you've all been waiting for, because you can watch any of these films, and I would love you. This is the one that you have to see. For me, personally, this is my favorite film, and will be, for a lot of aesthetical reasons and choices, which we're about to get into, with American Psycho. A much more recent film, directed by Mary Harron in 2000, starring Christian Bale, Willem Dafoe, Reese Witherspoon, Justin Theroux, Bill Sage, Samantha Mathis, Chloe Sevigny, Josh Lucas, and Reese Witherspoon. Words cannot describe how I felt when I first saw American Psycho. The film adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis's controversial novel, controversial to say the least, about Wall Street yuppie Patrick Bateman, personified by Bale, and his reign as a Wall Street master of the universe in 1980s New York. It's absolutely tremendous. I have a certain love affair with the 1980s, the music, the culture, the time, even all of the horrors of AIDS and nuclear devastation, because you have to take the good with the bad with anything that you would want to devote your heart to, or to love in any way. And I really love the 80s as a period, as a kind of a defining moment of humanity, of America. And I love it because I guess it might be like a hereditary or genetic, just passed down from the fact that I was born in it, as most of us were. And so you kind of have that attachment to the time period that you were born in. And it's funny because people would assume that when I was able to comprehend as a kid, well, then my attachment and my growing up would be in the 90s for sure. And I do have an attachment to the 90s, but I have an attachment to the 80s, so much so that I researched the 80s. I thrive on films set during the 80s, films that were made in the 80s, music. I mean, right there, the music is absolutely. You can listen to a song from the 80s, it's the 80s, which is not so with a lot of. Because there are some tracks from like the 70s and the 60s, kind of in the threshold, late 60s, early 70s, that are kind of interchangeable. But the 80s is so striking to me, and is so lovely, and I think it's the perfect backdrop for a horror satire, which American Psycho is. Um, it My best friend Garrett and I, when we first saw the movie in high school, we dubbed it our feel-good movie, which is funny because I've seen it so much and have watched it and have enjoyed it to the point where, even the scenes of horror. The one scene I can't take is the scene where Bateman kills the dog. When I got the book and I read it, there are more scenes of him killing more dogs. I can't handle that. It's really hard, especially once, like with Samantha losing her last year. But even before that, I can't take Violence Against Animals. That's the one thing I cannot, I refuse to take. But having said that, there are other scenes of horror. You know, like the scene at the end when Bateman is eating out Elizabeth's pussy, and then literally eats it out, and the sheets are starting to soak. Like that's like a, oh my god, that's a horror. That's a nightmare scene. In this house of horrors in Paul Allen's apartment that he's set up, and yet, like, there's that moment when Christy the hooker kicks him in the face, and he's like, not the face. Like like the sight of Bale running nude with a chainsaw and sneakers, like it is just so hilarious to me. I mean, and what I find funny, like all of the other protagonists, main characters in all of these films, I mean, Bateman is instantly the most fascinating thing about the movie, and that he's not so much a character as he's a caricature, um, like a pinball. He bounces and plays off of the scenarios in the movie. I mean, there's the wonderful scene when he and Jean, Chloe Sevigny, are gonna have their date. You know, when she's eating the sorbet and he's in the kitchen and he's just asking her these questions. Oh my god, it is just so hilarious how he acts and reacts and how he approaches things. You know, when he actually starts to emote and he's like, you know, Ted Bundy had a border collie. It was named Lassie. Did you hear about this? And she's like, who's Ted Bundy? And he's like, forget it. and like he had a thing of tape. He was gonna. I mean, so basically, he's like, you know, how am I gonna kill her? And then depending on how she answers, that kind of like a pinball again, it sets him off in a different way. And again, it's just one of the. It's just absolutely. It's not perfect. I mean, no film is, but it's kind of one of those films, a lot like Tim Burton's For Fat Man for me, where its imperfections, it really don't matter. They really don't. It's just absolutely so beautiful. It fits so many aesthetical choices and things that I love. Um, I just cannot get enough of American Psycho. And of course, the film is a lot easier to watch than the book is to read. The book is far more brutal. I mean, we're talking about sticking shotguns up in a girl's vagina and pulling the trigger. That's really hard to read, but it's so beautiful, and I think we've got everybody here. Hold on, because I do want to talk about some of the people. We're almost getting to an hour now. Sorry about that. The production design by Gideon Ponte, absolutely tremendous. Bale's apartment, the white enclosure, this perfect '80s box that Mary Herron talks about on the commentary. Absolutely gorgeous. Love that apartment. Where's Andre? Yeah, director of photography, Andre Sakula, the cinematographer. I mean, oh god, words cannot describe. And you know, and I think we're coming up on an hour now, so we're gonna stop. We've got the list. Actually, and you know, just to cap it off, I'm gonna go ahead and just go through the films again. Number 10, Memento by Christopher Nolan. Number 9, Raiders of the Lost Ark by Steven Spielberg. Where was it? Number 8. What was number 8? RoboCop? I can't remember. RoboCop by Paul Verhoeven. Number 7, Videodrome by David Cronenberg. Number 6, A Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick. Number 5, Blade Runner by Ridley Scott. Number 4, Seven, directed by David Fincher. Number 3, Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese. Number 2, Full Metal Jacket by Stanley Kubrick. And number 1, American Psycho by Mary Herron. Those are my top 10 favorite films. of the moment of 2012 of being a 23-year-old filmmaker, potential filmmaker, storyteller. Um, I hope you enjoyed them. Go watch them all. Please do yourself a favor. Go watch them. Oh, other honorable mentions before I go. Pulp Fiction, great title. Alien, again. What else do I have? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And all of Kubrick's other work, 2001, Eyes Wide Shut. I know Smeagol doesn't really like it, but Eyes Wide Shut is awesome. The Shining, Lolita, Spartacus. Just go watch Kubrick. Go watch Kubrick. All right, I'm out. Take care.